The ships came on a Tuesday morning. Remembered it clearly because she was eating breakfast when the sky turned dark. Not dark like clouds, dark like something huge was blocking the sun. The Empire had conquered 300 worlds before they found Earth. To them, it was just another small planet in a quiet corner of space. Nothing special, nothing dangerous. They expected the conquest to take 3 days. It took 2. Earth's government surrendered quickly. The aliens had weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They had ships that moved faster than light. They had soldiers with silver scales covering their bodies like armor. Fighting them was impossible. So humanity did what it always did when facing impossible odds. It survived. General arrived 6 weeks after the invasion. He was tall, even for a. His body was covered in dark silver scales that shined like metal under the sun. He had 4 arms, each one thick with muscle, and 4 eyes that glowed pale yellow. He had fought in 47 wars across 12 star systems. He had never lost. When High Command assigned him to oversee the Korean Peninsula, he felt insulted. This was work for a junior officer, not a decorated general, but orders were orders. Set up his command center in what used to be a government building in Seoul. He watched the humans go about their daily lives through the large windows of his office. They walked to work. They bought food from markets. They talked and laughed and cried. They seemed so ordinary, so weak. They had a rating system for conquered species. It measured strength, intelligence, threat level, and usefulness. Humans scored low on strength. Their bodies had no natural armor, no claws, no venom. They could not survive in extreme temperatures. They needed to eat and drink constantly. They were, by standards, one of the weakest species in the known galaxy. But they scored high on usefulness. They could learn quickly. They could work long hours. And they had clever hands that could build and fix almost anything. So they kept them alive. Workers were valuable. Became a translator 3 weeks after the occupation began. She spoke 4 languages, and she learned the tongue faster than anyone expected. The aliens needed humans who could communicate their orders to the population, needed to protect her family. It was a simple trade. Her brother hated it. He had been a soldier before the invasion, not a high-ranking one, just a regular man who served his country. When they came, his unit was ordered to stand down, to surrender. He still remembered the taste of shame in his mouth when he put down his weapon. Now he worked in a labor team, moving supplies and building structures for the occupation force. Every day, he carried heavy boxes under the watch of alien guards. Every night, he came home with his body aching and his pride wounded. Watched her brother change. The man who used to laugh easily and play games with neighborhood children became quiet. His eyes grew cold, but she also noticed something else, something they did not see. Was watching, learning. Every day he studied the aliens, how they moved, how they communicated, where they were strong, where they were weak. He never wrote anything down, he kept it all in his head. Was doing the same thing. The siblings never talked about it. They did not need to. They had grown up together, survived together, learned to read each other without words. They both understood that surrender was not the same as giving up. General held weekly assemblies in the main plaza. He liked to show the humans their place. He would stand on a raised platform, his 4 arms crossed, and speak about the glory of the Empire. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. The humans would stand and listen. They kept their heads slightly bowed. They showed no emotion. Thought this meant they were broken. He told his officers that humans were the easiest species he had ever conquered. What he did not understand was that humans had been surviving for thousands of years. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars among themselves. They had built civilizations from nothing and rebuilt them after they fell. They knew how to endure. They knew how to wait. Stood at the edge of the plaza during one assembly. She translated words for the crowd, her voice calm and clear. But inside she was counting counting guards, counting weapons, counting exits. Across the plaza stood with his labor team. His face was blank, but his eyes were sharp. He noticed that the guards changed shifts every 4 hours. He noticed that their armor had gaps at the joints. He noticed that they moved slowly when turning left. Small details, unimportant by themselves, but had learned something in his years as a soldier. Wars were not won by strength alone. They were won by those who paid attention, those who waited for the right moment. The moment was coming. Neither nor knew when, but they could feel it approaching like a storm building on the horizon. General finished his speech and looked out at the silent crowd. He saw a conquered people, weak, obedient, harmless. He saw exactly what the humans wanted him to see. 3 months into the occupation, on an ordinary afternoon in the plaza, everything changed. But that is a story for another time. For now, the humans waited. They worked. They obeyed. And they remembered everything. The afternoon was hot and the plaza was crowded. General had called another assembly, his third that week. He was angry about something. The workers whispered that a supply shipment had been delayed. Others said that high command had criticized his reports. No one knew for certain. They only knew that an angry was a dangerous. Stood near the platform, ready to translate. Her throat was dry from the heat, but she kept her face calm. She had learned to hide her feelings. It was safer that way. Was in the crowd with his labor team. His muscles ached from the morning's work, but he forced himself to stand straight. He would not show weakness, not to them. Climbed onto the platform. His 4 eyes swept across the crowd like searchlights. When he spoke, his voice was harder than usual. He talked about discipline, about order, about the price of disobedience. Translated his words, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about her mother who was sick at home, about the medicine they could not afford, about the life they had lost. Then she heard the splash. A small boy, maybe 7 years old, had been carrying a container of water. He was trying to move through the crowd to reach his mother. But the crowd was thick, and his arms were tired, and the container slipped from his hands. Water splashed across the ground. Some of it reached the platform. Some of it touched General's ceremonial robe. The plaza went silent. Looked down at his robe. The dark fabric was stained with water. His 4 eyes narrowed. His jaw tightened. Without a word, he stepped down from the platform. The boy stood frozen. His face was white with terror. He was too scared to run, too scared to speak. He just stood there shaking. The boy's mother pushed through the crowd. Her name was. She was a thin woman with tired eyes and rough hands. She had worked in the labor teams until her health failed. Now she sold vegetables in the market to feed her son. Fell to her knees before. She bowed her head until it touched the ground. "Please," she said, her voice was barely a whisper. "He is just a child. He did not mean to offend. Please forgive him." Looked at her, then he looked at the boy, then he raised his armored hand. He was going to strike her. Everyone in the plaza knew it, the guards knew it, the workers knew it. She closed her eyes, unable to watch. But the blow never landed. Moved, no one saw him push through the crowd. No one saw him cross the distance between his position and the platform. One moment he was standing with his labor team. The next moment he was between, and his hand wrapped around the general's wrist. The crowd gasped. Guards reached for their weapons, but no one moved. No one could believe what they were seeing. A human was holding a general's arm, and the general could not pull free. His 4 eyes went wide. He tried to jerk his arm back. His muscles were stronger than any human's. His bones were denser. His body was built for war, but his arm did not move. His grip tightened. There was a sound, a small sharp sound, like a branch breaking, screamed. It was a strange sound, high and thin. The crowd had never heard a scream before. They had thought aliens did not feel pain. They were wrong. Leaned close to his face. His voice was quiet, but in the silent plaza, everyone heard him. In our culture, he said, we do not strike mothers. He released the general's arm, stumbled backward, clutching his wrist. His scales had cracked. Purple blood dripped between his fingers. His 4 eyes stared at with something the humans had never seen in a before. Fear. For a long moment, no one moved. The guards had their weapons raised, but they hesitated. They had been trained to handle riots and rebellions. They had not been trained for this, for a single human who could break a general's bones with his bare hands. Found his voice. It came out as a hiss. Seize him. 6 guards rushed forward. They were tall and strong, with armor covering their bodies and weapons in their hands. Any one of them could kill a human easily. Did not run. The first guard swung his weapon, stepped to the side, and the weapon hit empty air. His hand shot out and found the gap in the guard's armor right at the elbow joint. The guard's arm bent the wrong way. He fell. The second guard tried to grab from behind, dropped low, swept the guard's legs, and drove his elbow into the guard's throat. The guard collapsed, gasping. The third and fourth guards attacked together, moved between them like water flowing around stones. A strike to one knee, a palm to one chin. They went down. The fifth guard managed to land a blow on shoulder. It was a strong blow. It would have killed most creatures. Grunted in pain, then grabbed the guard's weapon arm and twisted. The guard screamed and dropped. The sixth guard turned and ran. 30 seconds. 6 guards stood in the middle of them, breathing hard. His shoulder was bleeding, his hands were shaking, but he was standing. The crowd watched in stunned silence, watched with tears running down her face. She was not crying from sadness. She was crying because for the first time in 3 months, she felt something she thought the invasion had killed. Hope clutched his broken wrist and stared at. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He had conquered 47 worlds. He had defeated armies and crushed rebellions. He had never felt afraid. Until now. Looked at him. There was no anger in his eyes, no hatred, just a calm certainty that was somehow more terrifying than rage. We surrendered our weapons, said. We never surrendered ourselves. More guards were coming. Knew he could not fight them all, but it did not matter. What happened next was not important. What mattered was what had already happened. The humans had seen, they would remember, and they would understand. They were not as weak as they appeared. They took to a holding cell beneath the command center. The walls were made of thick metal. The door had no handle on the inside. There was no window, no bed, no light except for a dim glow from the ceiling. Sat on the cold floor and waited. His shoulder throbbed where the guard had hit him. He could feel the bruise spreading under his skin, but he had felt worse pain before. During his military training, he had been beaten, frozen, starved, and pushed beyond every limit he thought he had. He had learned that pain was just information. It told you that you were still alive. Above him, in the command center, General was having a very bad day. His wrist was in a regeneration cast. The medical officer had looked at the injury with confusion. The bones had been crushed, not just broken, crushed by a human hand. It should have been impossible. Stood before a communication screen, facing the pale blue image of Admiral, his superior in high command. The Admiral's 4 eyes were cold. Explain, the Admiral said. Tried to keep his voice steady. There was an incident. A human attacked me during a public assembly. A human broke your wrist. Yes. A species with no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced strength. Yes. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. This is very unusual, General. Our initial assessment rated humans as a minimal threat, Category 7, suitable for labor only. The assessment may have been incomplete, said carefully. That is what concerns me. The Admiral leaned forward. I am sending an investigation team. In the meantime, find out what this human is. Is he a genetic experiment, A hidden military project. Find answers, General. High Command does not like surprises. The screen went dark. Stood alone in his office, his broken wrist aching, his mind racing. He needed answers, and he knew exactly where to start. Was brought to his office 1 hour later. 2 guards stood behind her, their weapons ready, sat behind his desk trying to look calm, but could see the fear hiding behind his eyes. She had become good at reading expressions. Your brother said, what is he? Kept her face blank. He is a human like me, like everyone else. He is not like everyone else. He defeated 6 of my guards. He broke my bones with his bare hands. No normal human can do that. Almost smiled, almost. General, she said, may I speak freely? Nodded. He was desperate enough to listen. Took a breath. She had been waiting for this moment, waiting to explain what they had failed to understand. My brother is not special, she began. He was a soldier, yes, but not a super soldier, not a genetic experiment. He was just a man who trained his body and his mind. In our country, we have a martial art called Taekwondo, taught it to children. He is ordinary. His 4 eyes narrowed. That is not possible. It is not only possible, it is common. Stepped forward. The guards tensed, but she ignored them. General, your people made a mistake when you conquered Earth. You looked at our bodies and saw weakness, but you did not understand what our bodies can do. She began to explain. She told him about human endurance, how humans could run for hours without stopping, longer than any other creature on their planet, how their ancestors had hunted by simply chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Persistence hunting, it was called. Humans were not fast or strong. They were relentless. She told him about adrenaline, how human bodies could produce chemicals that temporarily increased strength, speed, and pain tolerance, how a mother could lift a vehicle to save her child, how a soldier could keep fighting with wounds that should have killed him. She told him about adaptation, how human bones grew stronger after breaking, how human muscles grew larger after being damaged, how human immune systems learned from every infection and became more powerful. She told him about the human brain, how it could learn any skill, solve any problem, adapt to any situation, how humans had gone from living in caves to walking on their moon in less than 10,000 years. And then she told him about something that could not be measured, something that did not show up in biological assessments. We protect each other, said, not because we are strong, because we know we are weak. We survive by working together, by fighting for each other, by refusing to give up. She looked directly into his 4 eyes. My brother did not fight your guards because he thought he could win. He fought because he could not watch you hurt that woman. He would have died to protect her, a stranger, someone he had never met. Stared at her. That is irrational. Yes, agreed. It is, and it is why you will never truly conquer us. Silence filled the room, tried to process what he had heard. His military training told him to dismiss it as propaganda, but his broken wrist told him something different. You conquered our governments, continued. You took our cities and our weapons, but you never understood who we are. We are not a species of leaders and followers. We are a species of survivors, every single one of us. She paused, then added quietly, your empire has faced armies and navies and air forces. You have never faced a planet where everyone is a soldier, where every grandmother and child and farmer will fight you with whatever they have, because that is what humans do. We fight. We lose. We get back up, and we fight again. His regeneration cast beeped softly. His wrist was healing, but the cold feeling in his chest was growing stronger. What do you want? He asked. Shook her head. I am just a translator, General. I do not want anything. I am simply answering your question. You asked what my brother is. She stepped back toward the door. He is human, and that should terrify you. The guards escorted her out, sat alone in his office for a long time, staring at the wall. He had conquered 47 worlds. He had never felt fear like this. Because he was beginning to understand that this war was not over. It was just beginning. The news spread like fire. Within hours of the incident in the plaza, every human on the Korean peninsula knew what had happened. They whispered it in markets. They typed it in hidden messages. They told their children at night, voices low but burning with something that had been missing for 3 months. A man had stood up. A man had fought back. A man had made a general scream. Was still in his cell. He did not know that he had become a symbol. He did not know that his name was being spoken in homes and factories and secret meetings across the country. He sat in the darkness and thought about his sister. He hoped she was safe. General sent an urgent message to High Command. He requested additional troops. He warned that the situation was more dangerous than initially believed. He waited for a response. The response came, but not from High Command. It came from Seoul, where a group of factory workers attacked a supply convoy. They used metal pipes and broken tools. They were not trained soldiers. They did not fight well. But they fought, and 3 guards were injured before the uprising was stopped. It came from where dockworkers surrounded a patrol unit and refused to move. The guards ordered them to disperse. They did not disperse. When the guards tried to force their way through, the workers fought back with their fists and their hooks and their chains. It was chaos. It was bloody. But when it was over, the patrol unit had been destroyed. It came from where a grandmother named walked up to a guard who was harassing her grandson. She was 73 years old. She weighed less than 50 kilograms. She drove a kitchen knife into the gap in the guard's armor and twisted. The guard died before he hit the ground. Was captured immediately. When they asked her why she did it, she said, "He touched my grandson. What else would I do?" Reports flooded into his command center. His communication officers worked through the night trying to keep track of the chaos. Every hour brought new incidents, new attacks, new deaths. They were not used to this kind of war. They were used to defeating armies. They were used to conquering governments. They were used to enemies who surrendered when they realized they could not win. Humans did not surrender. They did not stop. They attacked with whatever they had whenever they could, wherever they were weak. They died in large numbers. It did not matter. More always came. Stood in his office, watching the reports scroll across his screens. His broken wrist had healed, but the cold feeling in his chest had not gone away. It had grown stronger. He had studied human history. He thought it might help him understand his enemy. Instead, it had made things worse. Humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They had developed countless ways to kill, but more importantly, they had developed countless ways to resist, to survive, to never give up. He read about a city called Stalingrad, where humans had fought for months in frozen ruins, eating rats and melting snow for water, refusing to surrender even when surrender was the only logical choice. He read about a small country called Vietnam, where farmers with old weapons had defeated one of the most powerful nations on Earth. He read about resistance movements in occupied territories, where ordinary people had risked everything to fight against impossible odds. The pattern was always the same. Humans could be beaten, they could be conquered, they could be killed, but they could never be broken. Had not been arrested. Needed her as a translator, and he was afraid of what might happen if he harmed sister. So she continued her work, translating orders and messages, moving through the command center like a ghost. No one suspected that she was also coordinating the resistance. It had started months ago, before the incident in the plaza. Had recognized early that the occupation would not last forever. Nothing lasted forever. The question was how to speed its end. She had made contacts, shared information, built networks, all while standing beside officers and translating their words. Now those networks were active. Messages flowed through hidden channels. Supplies moved through secret routes. Plans were made in whispered conversations. The resistance did not have weapons, not real weapons anyway. They had tools and kitchen knives and bare hands, but they had something more important. They had information. Knew where the supply depots were. She knew when the guard shifts changed. She knew which officers were competent and which were not. She knew the codes and the passwords and the weak points. And she shared everything. Called an emergency meeting with his officers. They gathered in the command center, their faces grim. "This cannot continue," said. "We are losing control." "We should make examples," one officer suggested. "Execute the rebels publicly, show them the cost of resistance." "We tried that," another officer said. "It made things worse. For every rebel we kill, 10 more appear. Then we kill them all." Silence. Everyone knew what that meant. Orbital bombardment, destruction on a massive scale. It was technically possible. The fleet could glass the entire peninsula in a matter of hours. Shook his head. "High Command will not authorize it. The humans are too useful as workers, and there are political considerations. Other conquered species are watching. If we destroy the humans completely, it sends a message." "What message?" "That the only way to resist the Empire is to be destroyed entirely. Some species might choose that path rather than submission. The Empire cannot afford a galaxy full of martyrs." The officers exchanged glances. They were soldiers, not politicians, but they understood the logic. Looked at his screens at the endless stream of incident reports. Somewhere in this building, a human woman was translating his orders. Somewhere below, a human man sat in a cell, waiting. Somewhere outside, millions of humans were preparing to fight. He had made a terrible mistake. He had struck at a human and expected submission. Instead, he had awakened something ancient and fierce. He thought about what it said. Every grandmother and child and farmer will fight you. He was beginning to believe her. Sat in his cell and waited. He did not know what was happening outside. He did not know that his people were rising up. He only knew that he had done what was right, and that he would do it again if he had the chance. The door opened, light flooded in. It was time for the next chapter to begin. The message reached the High Council on a cold morning, 3 weeks after the incident in the plaza. Admiral read it aloud to the assembled leaders, his voice heavy. "Recommend immediate withdrawal from Earth. This species is more dangerous than initial assessment indicated. They do not fight like soldiers. They fight like survivors. Every single one of them. We cannot win this war without total destruction of the planet. I advise against this course of action." The message was signed by General, the same general who had conquered 47 worlds, the same general who had never lost a battle. The council debated for 6 days. Some members wanted to authorize the destruction of Earth. It was the only way to be certain, the only way to send a message to other conquered species about the cost of rebellion. Others disagreed. The message had already leaked. Stories about the human uprising were spreading through the galaxy. Conquered peoples on 100 worlds were whispering about the small, soft creatures who had made the mighty afraid. If the Empire destroyed Earth, it would prove something terrible. It would prove that they could only rule through complete annihilation. It would prove that resistance was possible, even if it ended in death. And for some species, death was preferable to endless submission. The Empire could not afford that. It was built on the belief that resistance was futile. If that belief crumbled, everything crumbled. On the 7th day, the council reached a decision. They would negotiate. General received the orders with mixed feelings. Relief, because the killing might finally stop. Shame, because he was being asked to surrender to creatures he had once considered inferior. Fear, because he did not know what the humans would demand. He released from his cell personally. The human man walked out slowly, blinking in the light. He had lost weight. His shoulder had healed badly, but his eyes were the same. Calm, certain, unbroken. "We are going to negotiate," said. Nodded, he did not seem surprised. The meeting was held in the ruins of a government building in central Seoul. It had been destroyed during the initial invasion. Now it was a symbol, a reminder of what had been lost and what could be regained. Arrived with a small escort. He had wanted more guards, but high command had forbidden it. They did not want to appear threatening. They could not afford to appear weak either. It was a difficult balance. Was waiting for him, stood beside her brother, her face calm but her eyes sharp. Behind them stood a crowd of humans, old and young, men and women, workers and teachers and farmers. They did not carry weapons. They did not need to. Stopped a few meters away. His 4 eyes studied the siblings, the man who had broken his wrist, the woman who had explained why. "What do you want?" he asked. Considered the question. He had thought about this moment for weeks, what to demand, what to say. In the end, he had decided to keep it simple. "Leave," he said. "All of you. Every soldier, every ship, every piece of equipment, leave our planet and never return." "And if we refuse?" Did not answer. He did not need to, knew what would happen. The fighting would continue, the dying would continue, and eventually one side would destroy the other. The might win, but at what cost? "There is more," said. She stepped forward and noticed that his guards shifted nervously. A small woman, a translator, and yet they feared her. "Tell the others," she said. "Tell every species in your empire. Tell them what happened here." "Tell them what?" "Tell them that humans remember." Her voice was soft but clear. "We remember every kindness, every cruelty. If your people come to us in peace, we will welcome them as friends. We will share our stories, our food, our music, our knowledge. We will treat them as family." She paused. Her eyes met, and he saw something ancient in them, something that had existed long before the Empire, long before space travel and star maps and galactic conquest. "But if they come as conquerors," she continued, "they will learn what you learned. We are small, we are soft, we break easily." She smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a species that had survived ice ages and plagues and world wars, a species that had crawled out of caves and reached for the stars, a species that bent but never broke. "And we never stopped getting back up." Stood in silence. He thought about his long career, his many victories, his reputation as an unbeatable commander. All of it felt hollow now. He had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest. He had found something else entirely. A species that should have been weak but was not. A people who fought not because they could win, but because they could not accept defeat. He had struck a human. He had regretted it instantly. "We will leave," he said finally, "within 1 lunar cycle." Nodded, and the message. "It will be sent." Hesitated, then asked, "Do you really believe other species will listen? Do you think this will change anything?" Answered, "We do not know, but we have to try. That is what humans do. We hope, we try, we fail, we try again." Looked at the crowd behind them. The old grandmother who had killed a guard with a kitchen knife. The factory workers who had attacked a convoy with metal pipes. The children who had carried messages through dangerous streets. Ordinary people. Extraordinary courage. "I think," he said slowly, "that I will never understand your species." "No," agreed, "you probably will not." The left Earth within a month. Their ships rose into the sky and disappeared among the stars. The humans watched them go in silence. There were no celebrations. Too many had died. Too much had been lost. But there was something else, something quiet and powerful. Pride. General retired from military service. When asked about his career, he refused to discuss his many victories. He only talked about one thing. "I made a mistake," he would say. "I struck a human." The story spread through the galaxy. It reached every conquered world, every oppressed people, every species that had ever wondered if resistance was possible. And on 100 planets, beings who had once believed themselves powerless looked up at the stars and thought about a small blue world in a quiet corner of space. A world full of soft, fragile, impossible creatures. Creatures who never stopped getting back up. The universe remembered. They did not make that mistake again.